This is SpaceTime, Series 28, Episode 125, for broadcast on the 17th of October 2025. Coming up on SpaceTime, raging winds on the red planet Mars, unlocking the secrets of Earth's deepest past, and NASA on track to send its astronauts to the moon next year. All that and more coming up on SpaceTime.
Welcome to SpaceTime with Stuart Gary.
A new study has shown that wind speeds on Mars can reach as much as 160 kilometres per hour, far higher than previously thought, despite the red planet's very thin atmosphere. The findings, reported in the journal Science Advances, demonstrates how these winds affect the Martian climate and the distribution of dust. The wind movements and the whirling up of dust also create dust devils, rotating columns of dust and air that move across the red planet's surface. In images of Mars, wind itself is invisible, but the dust devils are clearly seen. And due to their movement, they are valuable indicators for researchers to determine the otherwise invisible winds. The new study shows that the dust devils and the winds around each of them reach significantly higher speeds than previously assumed. In fact, the stronger winds could be responsible for a larger part of the dust uplift on Mars than what was previously thought. And that in turn has a major influence on the planet's weather and climate. The new observations are based on data from the European Space Agency's Mars Express and ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter spacecraft. The study's lead author, Valentin Meckel from the University of Bern, says his team were able to identify dust devils in more than 50,000 satellite images. They then examined stereo images of around 300 dust devils in order to measure their directions of movement and velocities. Meckel says the stereo images can be used to measure the movement of the dust devils, and if you put the stereo images together in a sequence, you can observe how dynamically the dust devils move across the surface. The results show that the dust devils and the wind surrounding them on Mars can reach speeds of up to 44 metres per second. That's around 160 kilometres an hour across the entire planet, which is much faster than previously assumed. Earlier measurements on the surface of Mars had shown that winds mostly remain below 50 kilometres per hour, and in rare cases can occasionally reach up to 100 kilometres an hour. Meckel says observations of the new much higher wind speeds in turn influences the dust cycle on the red planet, pumping a considerable amount of dust into the Martian atmosphere, much more than previously thought. The data shows where and when winds on Mars seem to be strong enough to lift dust from the surface. In fact, this is the first time that such findings have been available about the red planet on a global scale. And the results will be especially crucial for planning future manned missions to Mars. Better understanding of wind conditions and dynamics will allow mission managers to model the Martian atmosphere and associated surface processes far more precisely. This is SpaceTime. Still to come, unlocking the secrets of Earth's deep past, and NASA on track to send astronauts back to the moon next year. All that and more still to come on SpaceTime. A new study has revealed some surprising clues about the beginning of subduction on planet Earth. The Hadean Eon, spanning from 4.6 to 4 billion years ago, remains the most enigmatic chapter in Earth's history. It all began with the planet's formation, followed by a massive collision with a Mars-sized object called Theia, which led to the creation of the Moon and the complete melting of Earth's interior, turning the proto-Earth into a molten magma ocean. Solidification of the Earth's crust began around 4.5 billion years ago. But what happened next has long been debated. The prevailing theory suggests that, until at least the end of the Hadean, Earth was locked in what's called a stagnant lid tectonic regime. Now, in this model, the planet was covered by a rigid, immobile outer shell, with convection processes occurring deep in the mantle, but lacking any subduction, that is, the downward sinking of crust into the Earth's interior and continental crust formation seen in modern plate tectonics. But now scientists are challenging that view. A new study, reported in the journal Nature Communications, suggests that subduction and continental crust formation were already active and more vigorous in the Hadean than previously thought. Using an innovative analytical technique, the study's authors measured strontium isotopes and trace elements in melt inclusions which were preserved in 3.3 billion-year-old olivine crystals. The authors then used cutting-edge geodynamic simulations in order to interpret these geochemical signals in terms of early Earth processes. Their new findings are providing evidence of a far more active early Earth, indicating that extensive subduction and continental formation may have started hundreds of millions of years earlier than previously thought. This is SpaceTime. Still to come, NASA are on track to send astronauts to the Moon next year, and later in the science report, a new study has found that octopuses, or is it octopi, have a handedness. All that and more still to come on SpaceTime. NASA says it's on track to send humans back to the Moon early next year. Mission managers say the Artemis II mission is expected to launch in April, but it could fly as early as February depending on preparations. Now, Artemis II won't land on the Moon. That'll need to wait until the Artemis III mission in 2027. But it will re-establish a human presence around the Moon, sending a 4-man crew on a 10-day shakedown flight, the first to orbit the Moon in more than half a century. It'll provide an opportunity to test the new Orion capsule with a crew on board. The Artemis I mission, which circled the Moon back in November 2022, was unmanned. The multinational crew aboard Artemis II will include 3 Americans and a Canadian, and will pave the way for both the long-term habitation of the Moon and eventually manned journeys to Mars and beyond. And needless to say, China will be watching closely as Beijing forges ahead with its own rival manned moon program, targeting a touchdown on the lunar surface in 2030 and the establishment of a joint Sino-Russian base at the lunar South Pole soon after. As well as testing the new Orion spacecraft, the Artemis II crew will also undertake numerous scientific investigations as they swoop down to around 6,500 kilometres above the lunar surface. From this altitude, they'll have a unique opportunity to study the lunar far side, analysing and imaging geological features on the surface, including impact craters and ancient lava flows. They'll be able to describe nuances in shapes, textures and colours of surface features, which will help reveal the geological history of the area and will be crucial for the upcoming Artemis III mission to the lunar South Pole landing site. It's also an opportunity for scientists and engineers back at Mission Control to collaborate during real-time operations, building on years of testing and simulations. The Artemis II crew will be the first humans to see some parts of the lunar far side with the unaided eye. During the 9 Apollo missions that left Earth's orbit, astronauts saw parts of the lunar far side, but not all of it, as they were limited by which sections were lit during their orbits. One of the previously unlit regions was the Oriental Basin, a 1,000-kilometre wide crater that serves as the transition point between the near and far side and is sometimes partly visible along the Moon's western edge. The astronauts may also get to observe flashes of light from space rocks striking the lunar surface. In addition to lunar science observations, the crew will also gather data on the effects of the space environment on their health and performance. Data which will help inform longer-term lunar exploration efforts as well as future manned missions to Mars. This report from NASA TV.
NASA's Artemis II is the first crewed lunar mission in over 50 years. 4 astronauts will venture around the Moon, preparing humanity for a long-term lunar presence for scientific discovery and exploration. The 10-day test flight will demonstrate a range of deep space exploration capabilities with crew. The mission will prove the Orion spacecraft is ready to keep astronauts alive in deep space and allow the crew and ground teams to practice operations essential to the success of future missions. On launch day, the Artemis II crew suits up, undergoes final checks, and rides in the crew transportation vehicles to Launch Pad 39B at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Stacked on the mobile launcher, NASA's 322-foot-tall SLS, or Space Launch System rocket with the Orion spacecraft awaits the crew, having made its 4-mile journey from the vehicle assembly building on the crawler transporter to the pad. The launch team fills the SLS propellant tanks with over 700,000 gallons of liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen and verifies guidance, communications, and avionics. At 12 seconds before liftoff, the hydrogen burn-off igniters fire. About 6 seconds later, the rocket's 4 RS-25 engines ignite. When the countdown reaches 0, the umbilicals retract, giving SLS and the crew in Orion the clearance to begin the journey. The 6 million-pound moon rocket produces 8.8 million pounds of thrust to accelerate towards space. 75% of this power comes from the two 17-story solid rocket boosters, each producing 3.6 million pounds of thrust. About 2 minutes in, the boosters are released, their solid propellant consumed. The core stage and its RS-25 engines continue to propel Orion and the crew to space. After 3 minutes, the protective fairings surrounding Orion's service module are ejected, exposing its solar arrays. 6 seconds later, the launch abort system is ejected from Orion. The crew has safely reached Earth orbit, though they could still abort using service module engines. About 8 minutes after launch, the SLS core stage engines shut down and the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, or ICPS, and Orion separate from the core stage. Orion and the ICPS are now flying free. Orion's 4 solar arrays deploy, powering the spacecraft and charging its batteries for when it moves out of direct sunlight during the journey to the moon and back. After a 90-minute orbit, the engine of the rocket's upper stage, or ICPS, ignites to raise Orion to a high Earth orbit. The Artemis II crew and Mission Control in Houston then began a nearly 24-hour systems check while the astronauts are still relatively close to Earth, familiarizing themselves with their new home for the next several days. Once in high Earth orbit, Orion separates from the upper stage. The expended ICPS and Orion stage adapter serve as a target for a manual handling test called the Proximity Operations Demonstration, preparing future crews for rendezvous, docking, and undocking with other spacecraft. During the demonstration, Artemis II astronauts use cameras and line of sight through Orion's windows to pilot the spacecraft as they approach and back away, assessing Orion's handling qualities, hardware, and software. Following the demonstration, spacecraft data is collected to verify system performance, such as life support, communications, and navigation, ensuring Orion and the crew are ready for the voyage ahead. About 23 hours later, Orion's service module performs the Translunar Injection Burn, or TLI, pushing Orion out of Earth orbit and on an approximately 4-day trip to the moon. Ultimately, the crew's figure-8 flight path extends more than 230,000 miles from Earth. During the trip, the astronauts continue to evaluate the spacecraft systems and practice emergency procedures like testing the radiation shelter. The Artemis II crew travels about 4,600 miles beyond the moon, becoming the first humans to lay eyes on the lunar far side in over 50 years. Their observations will help us prepare for future missions at the moon. During this period, there will be an anticipated communication blackout between Mission Control and the spacecraft. As the crew returns from the far side of the moon, Orion is drawn home by Earth's gravity in a free return trajectory, ensuring a fuel-efficient 4-day trip. Before entering the atmosphere, Orion's crew module separates from the service module. 12 thrusters ensure Orion is properly oriented at an altitude of about 75 miles from Earth's surface. Orion and the crew enter Earth's atmosphere at a speed of nearly 25,000 miles per hour. Decelerating at a rate up to 4 times the force of gravity, the crew will feel 4 times heavier than they do on Earth. Orion's heat shield protects the spacecraft from temperatures of about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, about half as hot as the surface of the Sun. To slow its descent, Orion begins a precise deployment sequence of 11 parachutes. 3 forward bay cover parachutes first separate the protective thermal cover that sits over the chutes. 2 drogues slow and stabilize the crew module, then cut free. 3 pilot chutes lift the 3 main parachutes, deployed at an altitude of 9,000 feet and traveling 130 miles per hour. These chutes slow the crew module to a speed of less than 20 miles per hour. After traveling more than 595,000 nautical miles, Orion splashes down in the Pacific Ocean, about 50 nautical miles from the California coast, just 16 minutes after entering Earth's atmosphere. After splashdown, a recovery team that includes the U.S. Navy, Air Force, and NASA approaches Orion. The team ensures it's safe for the crew to exit before divers help the astronauts onto an inflatable front porch, hoist them into helicopters, and fly to the recovery ship. Orion is towed into the ship for its return to Kennedy Space Center. Their mission complete, the crew is flown back to land and step on solid ground for the first time in 10 days.
This is SpaceTime. And time now to take another brief look at some of the other stories making news in science this week with a science report. A new study has found that people with obstructive sleep apnea might suffer worse symptoms if they live in areas with high levels of air pollution. The findings, presented to the European Respiratory Society Congress, looked at data from more than 19,000 sleep apnea patients from 14 countries across Europe, including information on their age, sex, body mass index, and smoking status, along with sleep study information. The authors combined the study data with information about air pollution and found that for every increase in air pollution as measured in parts per million, there was a modest but measurable increase in instances of a patient stopping or slowing breathing during the night. A new study has found that octopuses, that's the correct terminology, do have a hand in this. The findings, published in the journal Science Reports, shows that while they may have 8 options instead of the 2 that people have, it seems they choose different arms depending on the task. The authors looked at videos of wild octopuses in the Caribbean and Spain. They found that octopuses tend to use their front forearms to explore their surroundings, while their rear arms are more likely to be used for moving around. The findings are some of the first to show octopuses engaging in a behaviour that's currently only well known in primates, rodents and fish. A new study has detected disease-causing microbes in raw commercial cat foods, including some that are resistant to antibiotics, creating risks for both pets and their human companions. The findings, reported in the journal Communications Biology, found Salmonella, Cronobacter and E. coli in raw or partially cooked meat sold frozen, refrigerated, and freeze-dried in stores and online. Scientists at Cornell University say these pathogens can transfer from pets to humans and are of special concern for young children and people who are old, pregnant and immunocompromised. The authors warn that most of these products have no warning labels on them, showing that the meat ingredients are not fully cooked, indicating that they could harbour live bacteria and potentially viruses and parasites that would make a family very sick. To reach their conclusions, the authors purchased a mix of raw and conventionally cooked cat foods. They then compared the communities of microorganisms in each sample, applying the same methods practiced by the US Food and Drug Administration when they cultured the bacterial samples. A group of tourists in Cornwall claim they've discovered the skull of a unicorn not far from the ruins of Tintagel Castle, which is said to be the birthplace of the legendary King Arthur. But Tim Mindham from Australian Skeptics says paleontologists suspect that the skull is actually that of a deceased pony, with a cow horn glued on top.
There are legends of King Arthur. It might have been based on a real person. There was actually a film that came out, or a TV series that came out a long time ago called Arthur the Warrior King, which actually set Arthur in a more Dark Ages environment, huts made out of stone and twigs and that sort of stuff. Could be just post-Roman of the UK. Then became elaborated on with round tables and knights and shining armour and gallantry.
All that was added later.
All that stuff. Totally added later, after the French
the bear or the red or something like that.
Arcturus.
Yeah.
Arcturus is the Latin term for the bear, and that's where they say Arthur came from.
Yeah.
The word Arthur. But there's no indication that Arthur was certainly not a round table king. He might have been just a local tribal leader, but, mysteries are elaborated on, and the stories, the legends are continued on and built on. But this is a case of some family heading towards Tintagel, which is the castle on a rocky outcrop at Cornwall, basically near the very bottom of the UK, bottom left of the UK. And they walked along the area, they bumped over something they thought looked like a rock or something, and they dug it up, and it supposedly turned out to be a unicorn skull. Now, okay, for a start, Tintagel is a legendary place where Arthur was supposed to be born. That's not necessarily true either, but it's a nice place. It's a spooky-looking place. I've been there, had a look at it. It's fun to go there.
I think the real Arthur, the person who Arthur's based on, was actually Welsh.
Highly likely, or possible. Again, if he was Arcturus, if he was Arcturus, he would have had a Roman name, but probably not Welsh, therefore. But, I mean, the whole thing is just shrouded in mystery and legend and all sorts of elaborations thereupon. So you have to, one, assume, did he actually exist in the first place? And that's not necessarily proven. He probably didn't have any association with Tintagel, but never mind, sounds good. Also probably didn't have any association with Glastonbury, but that's claimed as well. And, of course, Camelot and all those sort of things. This family dug up this stone. They said, it's a unicorn skull because it's got a horsey head-looking thing with a big bone coming out of the front. So they took it back around. They thought it was very interesting. They took it to a local pub, naturally. That's what you do. And the guy said, can I have that? The publican said, can I keep it? I'll give you all the beer you want. Kept it. And now it's sort of piece on show. So it's on display in the pub.
So what is it? Is it a malformed goat head or something?
People suggest it's two bones, right? It's a pony's head with a thing stuck on the front of it.
Right.
Something as simple as that. You don't need to be too malformed. And, of course, the people who found it said, we didn't fake it.
Like the Fiji mermaid.
Like the Fiji mermaid? People who found it said, no, we didn't fake it. Heaven forbid that we should do that. Yeah, it's probably a fake, I dare say, because there's never been any evidence that unicorns ever existed, even though a lot of countries have them on their coat of arms. A depiction of a rhino, who knows? Certainly there is the occasional goat and things that has a malformed goat head with a single horn at the front, or two horns sort of twine around each other. That could be the source of it, but this looks a pretty classic unicorn, although the bone out of the front is not as long as some depictions of unicorns have it, as in Harry Potter.
Wingardium Leviosa.
But no, I think we'll say this is a fun one. It's a con. If someone's made it and someone's found it, or the people who found it made it, who knows? There's no evidence to say it's a unicorn. But it's fun, hey?
That's Tim Mendham from Australian Skeptics. And that's the show for now. SpaceTime is available every Monday, Wednesday and Friday through Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcast, Pocket Casts, Spotify, Acast, Amazon Music, Bytes.com, SoundCloud, YouTube, your favourite podcast download provider, and from spacetimewithstuartgary.com. SpaceTime's also broadcast through the National Science Foundation on Science Zone Radio and on both iHeartRadio and TuneIn Radio. And you can help to support our show by visiting the SpaceTime store for a range of promotional merchandising goodies, or by becoming a SpaceTime patron, which gives you access to triple-episode commercial-free versions of the show, as well as lots of bonus audio content which doesn't go to air, access to our exclusive Facebook group, and other rewards. Just go to spacetimewithstuartgary.com for full details.
You've been listening to SpaceTime with Stuart Gary. This has been another quality podcast production from Bytes.com.